Hello, welcome to Technical Founders. My name is Carlos Lara, software engineer and entrepreneur, and in this video, we'll be learning about phase one of customer discovery, the first step to the epiphany. And this phase is called State Your Hypotheses. So at this point, you want to write down your business plan, but it does not contain assumptions or something that you think is set and definite. You have a series of hypotheses, as we've talked about before, and here you're laying out all of your hypotheses, and then in the subsequent steps you'll go ahead and validate them with real customers and learning, with validated learning. So the first part is the product hypotheses. So you're doing this because you've identified a problem that certain customers may have, people might have, and you're building a product that is a solution for this problem. And you have your product features, so that's part of your hypotheses. What are the features that will solve this problem? What are the benefits? Again, because you're solving a problem, what are the benefits for the customer? Intellectual property, is anything that you're doing proprietary? Is something protectable in the sense that you can patent it or get something, proprietary, intellectual property, something you can patent or something that you can protect, something that's unique to you. Dependency analysis, so for example, changing technology. Let's say you're building an app, and let's say that app depends on a certain technology. And let's say in our case, Xamarin Forms. So we're using Xamarin for building our mobile application. We have a dependency on the Xamarin team at Microsoft because Microsoft acquired them. And so that's something that we need to include, and we need a hypothesis also on what's going to happen in the future with them. And the next part is a product delivery schedule, because when we talk to customers, when we start planning, we need to have at least a rough idea, approximate idea of how long it's going to take to release this first version, this first minimum viable product. Then the total cost of adoption. For example, if your app or your product is not free, let's say you're selling to enterprises, to other companies, what is the cost of them adopting your technology into their current systems and the integration, and also time, costs, money, etc. So all of these are your product hypotheses, and we laid them out here in our business plan. Then we move on to the second part, which is the customer hypotheses. So we know we think we know what the product is. We have the hypothesis. Now we have a hypothesis about who the customer is, because again, at this point we're not sure. We have hypotheses. So the types of customers. So who are the customers, right? So that's the first part. The customer problems. Sometimes we think a customer has a problem, and then we talk to them, and then we learn that it's not really a problem for them. We thought it was, but it's really not, or maybe it is. So you go ahead and validate. So we have a hypothesis for the problems that they have. Then a day in the life of a customer, and as we'll get into later, shortly after this, you need to understand your customer very, very well. You need to go integrate yourself into their lives, like learn everything that there is to know about them, because only this customer intimacy, really understanding the customer on a deep fundamental level, is going to be very, very important in understanding what problems they have, what can be solved, what do they need, etc. So really understanding, you being very clear about this is exactly what happens in a day of our typical customer. Then an organizational map and customer influence map. So from getting to know your customers, you realize, they spend certain amount of time on social media, they read certain blogs, they read certain magazines, they follow this content. So you know who is influencing their decision, who they talk to make decisions, who influences their decision. If it's a corporation, if it's an enterprise, a company, an organizational map. So for example, VPs, how they interact with executives, or just the inner interaction between the different people in the organization. And for customers, like I said, who influences their decisions, who do they admire, etc. So that comes from really understanding the customer and getting to know them. The next customer hypothesis would be the ROI, or return on investment justification. In the example of a company that you're selling a software to, for example, let's say the software costs $500,000 to adopt. So they are going to give you $500,000 for the software, and the software is going to solve their problems. Now, how much money are they going to save over a certain period of time, etc. Those are the considerations of what is the return on the investment for the customer, being a company or a consumer, for your technology or your product. And then very important, minimum feature set. So again, We are not building the perfect, what we think is the perfect finished product. We are building a minimum viable product, just the minimum amount of features that will be enough to test whether we can solve their problems, whether there is a need here. So we have a hypothesis about what is the minimum amount of features that we can have in our application or in our product that will be able to test our initial hypotheses. So that's the customer hypotheses, and the next will be the channel and pricing hypotheses. So the product is not free typically. I mean, there's products, apps, for example, that may be free and then later they monetize in some other way once they have a lot of users. But for the most part, you have some pricing hypothesis. You think you know how much you're going to charge, and what is you need to consider the lifetime value of the customer, etc. So this is just, again, all of these are hypotheses, but you need to just set down a baseline value for the pricing. Let's say, $100 a month for a product, for a service offered through your app, for example. That's just an example. And then you go ahead and test it. Maybe the customers are willing to pay that or more or less or not at all. So you'll learn once you release the minimum viable product out to the market and start testing. And the other would be the distribution channel. So from getting to know the customer, the day in the life of the customer, you know where they're looking at content, where they're looking for products and services, etc. So that will give you an idea of what, or at least give you an idea so you can develop an educated guess for your distribution channel hypothesis. So for example, let's say your users, your customer, is on Facebook or some other social media platform throughout the day. Let's say that's they consume a lot of content through there. So now you know, oh, well, I can probably, again, hypothesis, I can reach them through there. So for example, targeted ads or contacting influencers, which we'll get to in a little bit. For example, people that they follow in social media and they follow their content, and maybe partner up with them and offer the product through them. That will be an idea. So you have all these hypotheses here about how you're going to distribute the actual product to the customers. Then you have your demand creation hypotheses. Here, so once you've identified your customer and you solve their problems, etc., now you need to think of how you're going to create demand, because your customers may not necessarily be looking for you. Maybe you don't exist. Maybe it's a latent need they don't know they have. So you need to have a hypothesis and really think about how you're going to create demand. Again, in the case of social media, the customer being on social media throughout the day, you could create demand through, for example, highly targeted advertising and things like that. So that would be your hypothesis here. And again, influencers. So let's say you're targeting millennial moms, and let's say you learn from getting to know them that they follow other millennial moms, for example, bloggers that post content about things that they like, etc., and they follow these people, they admire these people. Then you could start thinking of making a deal or contacting these influencers, and for example, saying, I'll give you my product for free, or I'll help you in some other way, or maybe I'll just pay you, and then you can tell your followers about this new product that I built especially for them. So that will be an idea. That's called brandscaping. We'll get into brandscaping in future videos. That's just something to keep in mind that can be very powerful. The next part is the market type hypotheses. Now, we covered this in the 4 types of startup markets in that video. If you haven't looked at it, I highly recommend you go check it out. It's in this series. But you have a hypothesis of what kind of startup are you and what kind of market are you. So are you entering an existing market? So there's already competitors, it's already been established, and you're entering that market with a new product that's differentiated in some way, so something to think about. Are you resegmenting an existing market? So there's a market that exists, but you're creating a new branch or a new segment in that market that you're truly different and very differentiated, but it's still within an existing industry. So are you that kind of startup? Or the other is, are you entering a new market? So are you creating a brand new industry, for example? This happens too. So and these are all very different than you might have. And initially, it's not very clear which one it is, but you're going to have an educated guess and a hypothesis about which one it is. And then as you go through the 4 steps to the epiphany, as you go through these steps, you'll learn the truth about where you are based on what you learn, based on validated learning, which we cover in the Lean Startup series, which I also highly recommend. Now, the last part is the competitive hypotheses. Now, Again, depends on where the competitive hypothesis depends on what kind of market you're in. So for example, if you're entering a new market, you may not have competitors exactly. Other startups typically are the competitors in a new market, but it's something to think about. So depending on what kind of market are you, you'll need to develop an educated guess or a hypothesis about what does the competitive landscape look like, and you need to do some research here, examine what is the basis of competition, what is the differentiation, how are different competitors different from one another, and how can you be different from them. And this we'll go in the future, very soon in the future, we'll actually talk about Blue Ocean Strategy, a fantastic book that I highly recommend, and we'll go into detail about Blue Ocean Strategy, but it basically lays out a framework to think about how to create brand new market space no matter what. Even if you're in an existing market or resegmenting a market or entering a new market, no matter where you are in what industry, you can always position yourself in a way that you're different than anyone else, even in old industries. I mean, this happens all the time, and we'll go into examples of Blue Ocean. That's the difference. Blue Ocean is a place where you don't have competition really, or it's different rather than Red Ocean. So Red Ocean would be, for example, there's 50 different companies, different competitors, and they're all exactly the same. They only differ by the name of the company, for example. That's just an extreme example, but they're all different. They're all competing. Profits are shrinking because they're all like lowering the price to compete with one another. But if you create a Blue Ocean, you can totally break away from that competition and create your own, and stand out by yourself and be different in the eyes of the customer. So competitive hypotheses really also need to think about upfront and put it in your hypothesis business plan, which is really what it is initially. So I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, please leave them at the bottom. Also, please subscribe so you're the first to be notified, and I'll see you next time.